with term love, but let's consider what St. John has to say about love. He tells us that God is love. Real love, then, must lead us closer to God, or it's not real love. Following the logic here? All right. God-like love desires the best for the person being loved. Sin, which separates a person from God to one extent or another, is not love. Fornication is not love. Adultery is not love. Those things are selfishness, for they put personal gratification before the good of another. When we see that marriage is a holy state of life, leading each spouse closer to God, it becomes evident why it's not possible to equate marriage to other types of relationships. Just can't do it. The other relationships establish their participants in sinful lifestyles that contradict the true nature of love. Courts can claim to redefine marriage. Couples can call their live-in partners husband or wife. But no human declaration can change the ultimate purpose or true objective nature of marriage. This is why it was important to begin at the beginning with God. Now, some people, even among Catholics, bristle at the very mention of the word sinful. Right? Who likes to be told they're a sinner? Who likes to be told that was a sin? But John tells us that if we deny the reality of sin, we are calling God a liar. And if we acknowledge the existence of sin, but want to decide for ourselves what is or is not sinful, we have fallen for the original temptation of Satan. We are presuming to exceed God's power. So it's not for us to rationalize what is or is not a sin. Satan tempted Adam and Eve to distrust God, to think that the Lord's limits were keeping them from happiness, right? Offered her the apple. Satan encouraged them to reject God's judgment of what was good and what was evil. They wanted God, but they didn't want to necessarily listen to Him. That sounds like God on our terms, not on His terms. And often we act the same way. We say we believe in God, even if we have questions and doubts regarding marriage. We have an obligation to seek the truth. We always have that obligation. We cannot act on a doubtful conscience. There's some people in here that know that now. Moral theology class. You cannot act on a doubtful conscience. If you have a doubt, you must go and get it cleared up. And we cannot allow our uncertainties to become an excuse to disregard the church, because Christ entrusted the church to guard and proclaim the truth about marriage. Isn't marriage also a civil institution? Is it? Yeah. The answer there is yes. It is. How does the church look at that? The church does acknowledge the civil aspects of marriage. But those who see it as strictly civil, as something having nothing to do with God, question what right the church has to speak about their personal unions and lifestyle choices. Theirs is the old live and let live argument. The church affirms the right of civil governments to make laws concerning marriage because marriage concerns the good of all citizens. However, civil laws cannot countermand the laws of God. Okay? They cannot. The church's position might be best stated by quoting Jesus. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. And marriage belongs to God. Now, some would say, we have no king but Caesar. They want to leave God entirely out of the picture. However, deleting God from marriage requires that we rewrite the history and origins of marriage. In doing so, those people would make themselves the creators of marriage, and we know that's just not so. Their actions also require that they erase natural law. The natural law is that law written by God in every human heart, and it provides us with an interior witness to the law of God. So natural law together with reason enables us to know there is a God. To reject God's natural law is to suppress the truth. Now, secularism is the dominant mode of public discourse these days. Moral relativism, secular humanism. Even though God's wisdom is a source of marriage, we must be prepared to support the moral position on marriage without recourse to Scripture or religious vocabulary. And making the case for marriage in secular terms in no way denies our faith. And I'll show you why. Now, while it does omit a higher dimension of marriage, the secular case is effective because all truth is God's truth. Genuine truth has an internal coherence that's part of the created order. We do not need to credit God with the laws of physics, such as gravity, to know that gravity works. You step off a cliff, you pretty much know what's going to happen. Yet God created those physics, and nobody questions that. Now, where the laws of physics and chemistry are violated, what happens? Bad things, right? The same goes for the moral realm. A violation of God's moral order brings chaos in human relationships. We see that all around us. The evidence of that chaos is a source of the daily headlines and nightly news, is it not? If we care to look, we can see this chaos in any number of social statistics: abortions, STDs, elder abuse, child abuse, incarceration rates, school dropout rates, divorces, temporary restraining orders, etc. When people of faith make the case for marriage using this kind of evidence, it is less likely to be perceived as imposing religion. Sometimes we're so deep in it, we don't realize what the alternative might be. It's interesting if you tell somebody about the Ten Commandments and they say, yeah, it needs to be eliminated from courtrooms and all this. And I say, what would happen if everybody followed the Ten Commandments in this country? Well, it'd be better. What are we arguing about? Okay? Although our post-Christian era has turned a deaf ear to Scripture, people are still hungry for the truth. They really are. The problem is they often seek the truth in the wrong places. And this is why the vocation of evangelization, which is your vocation, right, is so urgent. Government is the regulator of what the common good is, and in our Western democracies, the state takes its cue from the people, right? This is why our Catholic participation in reasoned public debate is so critical to this process. We must not and cannot shrink from the public square in defending natural marriage, because we are part of this culture, we are part of this state. And we can accomplish a lot in having this discussion with others. With practice and preparation, you may come to be known as the practicing Catholic who never once pushed religion during the conversation, and yet you win them over to your position. It will be not lost on your audience that you made persuasive points based solely on the societal consequences of not following God's law. You just got to point it out. In time, it will occur to many people to wonder, how can it be that the Bible and Catholic Church teach what is best for our communities. Understand, most atheists start from the position that if it's in the Bible, it's got to be wrong. You've got to turn that around. When God designed marriage, He did so knowing that without natural marriage, there would be no civilization as we know it. Got that? Without natural marriage, there would be no civilization as we know it. No civilization in which we as human beings could thrive and grow. Think about this. Name any culture that has survived without some form of natural marriage. Name it. You cannot. Hasn't happened. When we talk about marriage and civilization, we are typically confronted with the accusation of imposing our religious values on others. There are two assumptions that are being made when someone says that, when they tell us we can't impose our religious values on them. The first assumption is this, and I think perhaps many of you have experienced this. The first assumption is because I'm a person of faith, the moment I propose a view that is religious, it is automatically an imposition on everyone else. How does that work exactly? In other words, religious views are always forced upon others. Is that true? And the second assumption is that when we propose natural marriage, that proposal is valid only within a religious framework. That ignores history and the reality. Both of these assumptions are false, but the second one I want to look at. The question that Catholics can expect to address is, how does legalizing same-sex unions imperil natural marriage? How does it do that? What is the Catholic response to that question? The response is two questions back at them. Why have governments historically regulated marriage? Think about that one. And why not remove the state completely and leave the matter of intimate relationships and families to individuals? Now, after you ask those two questions, you need to take a long pause. Because most people realize the state has a vested interest in marriage and family. Why? Precisely because families are the foundation of the nation. Same-sex pairs cannot benefit the whole of the nation because they cannot bear the next generation. Population would plunge, and there would be no families, no citizens, no economy, no national future. This is precisely why the state regulates marriage as a particular social category within the culture. Marriage is a vital institution that must be kept healthy as possible for the good of all citizens. That's what we Catholics term the common good. In God's wisdom, He designed marriage for the common good because communities and nations thrive when their citizens act in accord with what benefits the whole, not the few. Now, some will argue that the state has no right to prevent a same-sex pair from forming a union. This argument has momentum because of our culture's distorted concept of individual rights. It's all about my rights, and it does not matter how my actions hurt the rest of you. We've become a fractured culture in which each person is his or her own autonomous government. Now, I can illustrate this principle quickly by using traffic laws. Suppose each driver were permitted to set his own rules of the road, pretty much like commuting to downtown Atlanta every day, right? What would happen? There'd be wrecks. I choose to go 120 miles an hour. Someone else chooses to do 10. That's probably not going to work well on I-85, right? The point is, these laws are enacted for the safety of both the individual and the public at large, to serve the common good of its citizens. The common good means that some drivers will drive slower than others, and some will drive faster than others. But no one objects to elevating the common good over individual preferences, do they? For the sake of orderly traffic and public safety. In fact, there are many categories of laws where you can see this at work. In the case of marriage, protecting natural marriage is simply to state requiring the unique institution that forms an orderly community and benefits the future of society. But there is a crucial distinction to be made about these laws. There's a difference between laws made for the common good and laws based on individual preferences. This is different. The difference between those two is an example of God's wisdom in this world. God created us as social human beings. It is in our nature to be inclined to interact, work, play with each other, cooperate with each other, and it's in our nature to pursue the common good. But we don't always pursue the common good. Why?